In this video, I want to help you to improve your slice backhand, and the way that I'm going to do that is to show you some of my own training and explain what I'm working on myself. So I'm going to start with my on-court training, explaining what I'm focusing on in my practice, and then I'm also going to go into detail about some of the things that I'm working on off-court and show you some exercises that you can work on to hopefully develop a better slice. Now, I'm naturally a right-handed player, but I had an injury to my shoulder in a mountain bike crash, so I'm no longer able to play right-handed, and I'm now relearning to play left-handed. I've been working at it for just over 2 years. My goal is to hopefully get back to the 5.0 level and be able to compete in the seniors ITF. So this is a training session that I did a couple of days ago working on my slice backhand. Technically, there are two main things that I'm working on. The first one is trying to keep my head as still as possible through contact. So I'm relatively happy with most of my technique. I'm now just trying to groove visual and head stability to try and increase my level of consistency. So all of the reps that I'm doing, my primary focus is just keeping my head still, keeping my eyes and my nose and my head lined up with the ball through contact, and just keeping them there for a moment or two after I've made contact with the ball, and then starting my recovery still having my head in position. In terms of how my session went, I'm relatively pleased with it. I think I did an okay job, but there were definitely some instances that you can see watching it back on video where I lifted my head a little bit soon, or I didn't get things perfectly lined up. And really the key to good quality practice is focusing on the thing that you need to focus on. So yes, obviously I want the ball to land in the court, I want to hit a good quality shot, but I'm not evaluating myself on where the ball lands. I'm evaluating myself on how many times I was able to keep my head and my eyes lined up with the ball through contact and just after contact, because the more times that I do that correctly, the greater the likelihood that I'll hit a good quality shot is. The second thing I'm working on technically is the timing. So everything in tennis comes down to timing. It's about, can you effectively use your kinetic chain to create the racket head speed, and can you make contact with the ball in as optimal a position as possible relative to your body and relative to the swing speed and the swing path. And really this one is just a case of playing around with things and experimentation. So what I'm doing here is alternating between a regular slice backhand with appropriate footwork like I was just practicing a moment ago, and then trying to hit some slice backhands from an open stance. Now this isn't something that I'm going to do very often, but it creates an interesting challenge in terms of the positioning and the timing using the kinetic chain and the upper body. So really I'm just trying to play around here. When I was hitting the regular stance, I was very consistent. I can hit 20 or so normally with pretty good control. But as you can see here, when I'm alternating between a regular stance and now kind of throwing things off by doing this open stance, it's a little bit more challenging. But that's okay. I'm trying to develop the kinesthetics, the feeling, the understanding of how I need to use my body appropriately. The next thing I did to work on my timing was altered the feed. So this time around I've got the ball coming from cross court, and it's got a little bit more topspin on, and it's kicking up, so it's bouncing a little bit higher. Obviously as a left-hander I'm going to be hitting my cross court backhand to my opponent's forehand, so I need to get used to dealing with this type of ball. So obviously I want to practice the timing on this shot, and everything else remains the same. It's just a kind of feeling out process, trying to get used to appropriately using my kinetic chain. I'm still trying to keep my head still through contact. That's still a focus of what I'm doing, and I'm just getting repetition after repetition, trying to do it all as well as I can. Again, I was relatively happy with how the training session went. I think technically the timing is a little bit more challenging on this one to the previous shot that I was dealing with. So again, there was a tendency for me to not keep my head stable for quite as long as I needed to on some of the shots. But overall, I think I did a decent job of working on the things that I was trying to work on. For the next round I worked on a similar setup, so I'm still dealing with the cross-court ball, but this time I was mimicking my opponent dropping the ball a little bit short. So instead of going back cross-court, I'm trying to cut across the ball and slide it down the line. Now in this shot I'd probably follow this to the net, so that's something I'll be working on in future, but here I'm working on just the slice down the line in isolation. So I'm really trying to chop across the ball, keep it fairly low, hopefully get it bouncing and then moving away from my opponent's backhand. And again, it's just all about the timing. Priority is still keeping my head down, stable through contact, but then playing around with the timing, getting used to the feeling of just coming across the inside of the ball rather than hitting through the ball in the way that I was a moment ago when I was hitting the ball cross court. This one is a fun shot, so this is something that I really used to enjoy as a right-handed player. I would say that my slice as a right-hander was definitely my weapon, so it's a shot that I'm enjoying playing with my left hand, kind of getting the feeling for carving around the inside of it. Hopefully when I've got this to be a nice consistent level, it's going to be a shot that I can use to really cause opponents a lot of problems, because it's going to be bouncing and then moving away from their backhand. So if I follow that to the net, hopefully it should open up opportunities for me to win a few easy points. The final round that I worked on was alternating between the two. So I had my ball machine set to random in terms of the vertical feed. So some of them it was feeding deeper, some of them it was feeding shorter. So now a little bit more visually unpredictable. My job is to try and recognize the ball as quickly as possible and then play the appropriate shot. So obviously if the ball is higher and deeper, I'm trying to come around that and take it back cross court. If the ball is shorter, I'm trying to recognize that, step in, and then do the slice where I'm down the line, where I'm kind of carving around the inside of it. But again, the focus remains the same. I'm still trying to just get repetitions, trying to get a feel for the timing, and trying to get the visual stability, keeping my eyes and my head lined up with the ball through contact. And again, I was relatively happy with how the training session went overall. You know, I'm happy with my slice in general. I feel like it's at the level I need it to be, so by the time I start playing tournaments next year, I should be good to go with this shot in particular. As I've just explained, one of my main priorities with my slice backhand is watching the ball through to contact and trying to keep my eyes and my head lined up with the ball at the moment of contact. So I'm working hard on the court to improve this, but I also do a lot of work off the court, because as you might have experienced, tracking the ball is harder than it should be. You know you're supposed to do it, but it can be challenging. And the reason it can be challenging is because it requires your eyes, your visual system to be functioning extremely well, and it requires a lot of coordination. So what I'm doing here is a simple vision training exercise called a smooth pursuit to improve my visual tracking. So I'm just following the letter in the logo, moving it in different directions. And the reason I'm moving it in different directions is because we've got different eye muscles and different parts of the brain that move our eyes in different directions. So we need to train all of them so that wherever the ball goes, we have the ability to follow it. Now, if you'd like to learn more about vision training and brain-based training, I've created a masterclass where I go into a lot more detail about it. I'll place a link up in the corner, and I'll place a link down in the description so that you can check that out if you are interested. And it'll also explain a little bit about my program and how I work with players if you would like to explore things and really take your game to the next level. So this is the smooth pursuit exercise. The second exercise I'm working on is something called a VOR, or vestibular ocular reflex. So now I'm keeping the ball still, but I'm moving my head in different directions. So as I move my head, my eyes are actually making that smooth pursuit motion that I've just done, but it's now coordinated and driven in a different way by the brain. So we have a balance system called the vestibular system that lives in our inner ear. That's what I'm working on here. It's responsible for controlling your eye movements when your head moves. And obviously, as you're playing tennis, your head is constantly moving. So in order to be able to track the ball well, you need to train your visual system and you need to train your vestibular system like I'm doing here. In addition to working on my visual system, I also do a lot of work to improve my coordination. And this is going to be really important for your technique and for your timing. So here I'm doing what looks fairly simple. This is a circle with my shoulder blade. So I'm trying to keep my arm completely straight and I'm trying to make a circle with my shoulder blade. I'm also working at a specific speed, so I'm trying to take 4 seconds to do circles in each direction. Being very precise with your movements like this trains the parts of the brain that create and coordinate movement. The better these brain areas work, the more coordinated you'll be, the more easily you'll be able to learn technique, and the greater control that you'll have over your shots. So this is the basic variation, and I also do more advanced variations that involve bands pulling me in different directions. So my intent is the same. I'm still trying to make a coordinated circle. I'm trying to keep the rest of my body still and just make the circle with my shoulder blade, but now the band is adding in a strength requirement, and it's also creating uneven pulling forces that my brain has to correct against, which further helps to improve the coordination by driving changes in these parts of the brain. Now, if you would like to learn more about coordination training, again, I want to remind you about that free class that I've created for you. It teaches about brain-based training to improve tennis performance. I'll place a link up in the corner and down in the description so that you can check it out. Okay, hopefully you've enjoyed the video so far. If you have, it'd be much appreciated if you could give me a thumbs up. And if you haven't subscribed to my channel before, it also really helps me out if you could subscribe to my channel. If you've got any questions or comments about what I've covered today, leave them down in the comment section. But before I close the video, I just kind of want to remind you of kind of the big take home, or a couple of big take homes from this video. Number one is the quality of your practice makes a big deal. It's one of the biggest deciding factors as to whether you're going to improve or not. I'm focusing on watching the ball through to contact because I've got all the kind of the foundations of the technique in place. A lot of people make the mistake of trying to work on too many things all at once. They'll be working on their footwork and the preparation and the contact point and watching the ball and the follow through, and it's simply too many things. Your brain can't do all that stuff in one go, so you've got to focus on one or two things at once, really prioritize them, and you've got to kind of start at the start. So if you do have issues with preparation or something like that, you have to fix that stuff first before you move on to watching the ball through to contact. The second big take home is the off-court work to improve how your body functions, whether it's fitness, whether it's strength, whether it's flexibility, whether it's brain-based training like I'm explaining here to improve vision and coordination. It's important to understand that you can only improve up until the point that your body prevents you from improving. So if there's physical limitations, you need to allocate enough time to work on those things, because if you don't do that, it doesn't matter how much you practice, you're still going to kind of get maxed out in terms of your performance. Okay, hopefully you've enjoyed the video. Like I said, I'll see you next time.